welcome to GearHeads. I'm Jesse, and today I'm here with the 1997 Jeep Cherokee, which is the XJ with the 4-liter inline-6 motor. And we recently did a few videos on this thing. We did a tune-up on it, we did an oil change, air filter, I cleaned up the throttle body, that was part of the tune-up as well. New spark plugs, wires, cap and rotor. The thing was actually driving pretty good, but it would misfire quite a bit under idle, and every once in a while it would misfire under load. But considering how bad the spark plugs looked, it ran pretty well. It had a check engine light for misfires at the time, and so I went ahead and cleared that code. We did all that work to it, and the car actually did run considerably better, but it still had a somewhat high and erratic idle, and the check engine light came back on. So let's go ahead and take a look at that and see where that takes us. So if you want to read your engine codes, you're going to want to get a code reader. Check a link in the description. I have a couple different ones that I'll list down there that you can use, and you should be able to just look under the dash here on the bottom left, right above where the hood puller latch is, that handle, and then turn your key on, or the ignition on, and I'm gonna go ahead and check this to go to scan the codes, but I gotta let this kind of boot up and get into the car's system first. Okay, so it got in and it found 2 codes. Interesting, I wasn't expecting 2. Yes, race data. This is just an old Harbor Freight scanner, but it works. It'll read the codes. So let's see, stored codes, what do we got right now? Oh good, manufacturer specific codes. You know what, I bet one of them is probably for the transmission. That one's been intermittent. Let's see, Chrysler. Oh, there we go. So this is a transmission code. This one has been intermittently coming on and off lately, and I believe I know why. But we'll get to that later. I'm not too concerned with this one. When it gets cleared, it actually only comes back once every few months. I believe it's actually a wiring issue, but it still drives all right. And hey, look, that's a new one actually. But so that has to do with our idle situation. Target idle not reached. And that's the Chrysler specific code, I guess, because this one says generic up here, and that one says Chrysler. Before I had scanned it, and it had a P0505, which was idle air controller motor. What I'm suspecting is a couple things. For one, all the carbon buildup in there, it's possible that it's keeping that valve open so that it's not operating properly. It's also possible that the motor's going bad and it's throwing this code right now and didn't throw the other one yet. But in any case, let's go ahead and take a look at that. Let me show you guys a few ways we can test it. And we'll take it apart and take a look and see what we find. Okay, so if you follow your intake down to the throttle body, this is the electric part of the throttle body here, and then you've got your cables back on this side. But what we're going after right now is the idle air controller motor slash valve, which is this guy right here. Now, this thing operates, it has a valve in it, and it's controlled by the ECU under the hood of the car here. And basically it tells this thing whether to open or close to let more air behind past the throttle body or less air to achieve the desired idle speed, which, you know, should be around 1,000 or so, maybe a little more when you're warming the car up. And once you're at operating temperature, it should drop down to 700 or 800. Somewhere around there should be acceptable. But right now, mine is pretty much always idling at about 11 or 1200. So I suspect either there's a problem with this valve, or it's possible that it just has a lot of carbon buildup that's causing it to stick. Either way though, I actually did end up buying one ahead of time just in case that's what it is, because I'm taking this off anyway, and they're really cheap. It was only about 12 bucks. But before we go ahead and just replace that, I would like to at least show you guys a few things to check on here to verify that this is actually what your problem is. You don't want to go ahead and replace this if it's potentially something else in the car causing the problem, tripping that code. So let's start off by unplugging this right here. Okay, so this has 4 wires going into it, and 2 of them are circuits, meaning there's 2 circuits going to this thing from the computer that power it. Now the outer 2 are on the same circuit, if that makes sense, and the inner 2 are also on the same circuit. So what I'm going to do is check, I wish I had back probes for this with a multimeter, but I don't have back probes with me right now, sadly. But I'm going to check for power with the ignition on each of those circuits, And then I'm gonna pull the IAC off here, and I'm gonna check for resistance on those circuits and see if the resistance is within range. If it is within range, then I might just try cleaning it up and throwing it back in before I start looking for other potential issues, because it's possible that the ECU could have a problem. It is old and it's a Chrysler, so they're known for having electronic issues. But anyways, what we're gonna need to take this thing off is just 2 bolts holding it on. There's one at the top and one down at the bottom, and you're gonna need a Torx bit. Let me see what size that is and I'll let you know. Okay, so this is the tool you're gonna need. This is a T20 Torx bit. It doesn't have to be in a socket like this. You can get them come in other styles, but I like the ones in a socket because it's a lot easier to get the force you need if you put it actually on a tool, and you can actually get the leverage to break them loose. A lot of times these things are pretty tight, and if you've just got like a small screwdriver style one, it's going to be a lot harder for you to break that loose. So let me go ahead and actually just pop that off. It's not going to take very long, and then I'll check the wiring and stuff and see how bad the buildup is in there as well. Well, these ones luckily weren't very tight. This is one you could probably actually do with a screwdriver style pretty easily. So I'm just going to take that socket off of the ratchet, and this is faster. And then just make sure you catch these screws when they come out and set them somewhere. If you have a magnet tray, put them on a magnet tray. If you don't, put them somewhere that you won't knock them over and fall into the abyss under the hood. There we go. I broke my own rule there of not dropping it because it's really hard to actually get your hands down underneath there. And the engine's pretty hot because I just drove it home from work. Right, there we go, got it. Okay, before testing out the IAC itself, it would be nice to have it all, be able to test these circuits with this whole thing plugged in so we can see both sides of it and see it actually running through the sensor. But sadly I can't do that because I don't have the proper tools. But I would still like to at least see that the ECU seems to be working by sending power when it's supposed to. So right now I have the key on and I have a ground over here. So right now I have the negative cable from the multimeter going to the ground on the battery, and just to test my ground and power, here we go. If I touch it, I get 12.45 volts, so that's good. And now here on the connector, like I said, there's 2 circuits. The outer 2 are a circuit when this is plugged into the IAC and operating, and the inner 2 are a circuit as well. So I believe on this thing it's going to be, if you're looking at it like I am right now, on the right is the A circuit, the main one. And there we go, I'm getting 12.41 volts because I have the ignition on. And then I get, let's see, on this one, so I get 12 on the outer one, I get nothing on the one next to it, and I get 12 on this one, which is on this circuit. And what's interesting about this is I believe you might be getting 12 volts here or 12 volts here and then nothing on the other 2 because it switches. Because I actually tested it right before I turned the camera on, and before I had 12 volts on both of these. So it must have switched, which is actually how it's supposed to work when the car's running. It's just interesting that it did it without the car running. So anyways, let's go ahead and test out the IAC next, and I haven't gotten back here to see in this yet and see how dirty it is, but I will check that in a few minutes. Okay, so on the idle air control motor itself, we're going to want to test these circuits and see if there's a proper amount of resistance on them. So first, let's set the multimeter to check for resistance. There we go. I'm going to make it beep too when it finds it. And then we really know. There you go. See? It's given a 0 because there is no resistance between these 2 because they're touching each other. So I'm going to test the outer 2 circuits. I'm just going to, it's not very easy, so sorry if I can't get it on the camera, but I'm just going to poke these down and touch the outer one on each side. Okay, there we go. Okay, that's 58.6 ohms. Which I believe is in spec. I'll let you guys know what the actual spec is on in a second. That's 58 ohms, and let's see what the inside ones are. 58.2 ohms is what I'm getting there. So 58.6 on the outer 2 and 58.2 on the inner 2. So let's go ahead and and see what the actual spec is on that. Okay, so I looked it up, and the proper resistance for the circuits in this thing actually is 50 to 60 ohms of resistance. So both circuits measured 58.5 or so, and that should be acceptable. So that means at least the circuitry in here is fine. I know I'm getting voltage from the ECU, but that doesn't tell me still if this thing's actually operating properly and moving. It's possible that this is mechanically broken inside. I'm just not 100% sure on that yet. And the sad thing is, if you have a nice scanner that you can plug in, you can command this to open and close and watch it do it and see if that see if it's functioning properly that way. But I have no way of seeing that because I don't have a scanner with me that can do that right now, and you probably don't at home either. So let me see if I can figure out another way to solve this problem. Okay, so after a little bit of investigation, my suspicion is that this one is dead. Now, first off, if you notice looking at this, it's pretty much all the way open. This thing's supposed to move in and out, and right now it's almost fully extended, I believe, and it's also kind of locked. It doesn't move at all. I don't know that moving it by hand really would be good for it anyways, but it is locked. And right now the Jeep has a high idle, and it has for quite some time. So that would make sense that it's stuck wide open. This is the brand new one that I got, and obviously I could just throw this in, see what happens, but I want to make sure that I actually need it. And luckily for me at least, it's annoying if you can't solve the problem, you know, without having another part to compare to exactly, but at least this is a cheap part and it was easy for me to do that because this was only like 10 or 15 bucks. This one is receded all the way. That's what it's supposed to look like normally when you, at least when you first get it. And then you can see this one actually does move. I don't know if it's good for it for me to do that, but it does move a little bit versus that one being locked up. And I did two things. I plugged in the original one to the back into the harness there, and I had Matt jump in the Jeep and turn the key on and off and off a few times, and I was getting absolutely nothing from it. Versus this one I plugged in, and I can't really show you on the camera because it doesn't actually move, but I can feel the motor in here like waking up, like it's about to try and do something. It gives like a couple small vibrations off. And then to test one more thing further, I got a similar thing when I came over here to the battery of the car. I got some alligator clips. Just little ones. You can buy these on Amazon or something anywhere. They come in handy sometimes for testing certain things out. So I'll throw a link in the description if you guys want to see where to get these. And I had a negative and positive, and I ran that to the, let me think. I ran that through the circuit on the old one and on the new one, and then the same thing happened as when we turned the key on and off. It's the cycling back and forth, and the computer's supposed to control it, so it's not actually good. I couldn't get it to actually make this thing move in or out all the way, but what I was able to do was get it to behave the same as when we turned the key on and off. This one would get like a tiny bit of a bump of movement, and I would feel it, versus that one would do absolutely nothing. So only other thing I'd like to do is go ahead and poke my head around in there, make sure that I don't need to clean it off more. I did just clean the throttle body, and I did try and clean that passageway, but I'll check it one more time, clean it out again. Doesn't hurt to spray some more brake cleaner in there and wipe it all clean. And we'll put this thing in the car, we'll clear the codes and see what happens. Like I said, it's a bummer I can't get a 100% sureness on, you know, on this one being bad, although, like I said, it is suspicious to me that it is completely seized up when it shouldn't be, and even though the circuits test good, it doesn't seem to be operating. So remember that. You can test the circuits, and sometimes the circuits are bad, and that's great. If you test it and you did not get any resistance there, or you're not getting power where you're supposed to, or something like that, you know there's a problem you can go after. This was not the case though. This is a mechanical issue. I believe this thing's just locked up from years of abuse and carbon and soot going through it. So anyways, let me go clean that passageway out. Okay, so here's the new one, fresh out of the box. And it does come with a small set of instructions. Most of the time these kinds of things are pretty straightforward, but sometimes when you're doing things with throttle bodies and idle air controllers, etc., it does help to read any other details that might help you. And I will tell you why when I get to the last step. First step is just says turn the ignition off, disconnect the electrical thing. It basically tells you to do with the first few steps what I already did. I already unplugged it, took the old one off by taking those Torx nuts or Torx bolts out, and then clean up the area, the surface, and clean out what you can inside. Put the new one in, plug it in, and then there's one more thing at the end here. It says, following reassembly and with engine at operating temperature, idle RPM may be abnormally high, and it has in parentheses 1800 to 2000 RPM. That would be really high for idle, and may not return to specification. Resetting is accomplished by operating the vehicle at normal engine temperature at a road speed above 40 miles an hour for at least 5 minutes. The ECM will command the IAC assembly to reset, and proper idle regulation should result. So basically, that's just a long way of saying, put this in, car might idle a little bit weird at first, just go drive it. And it did say go above 40 miles an hour for at least 5 minutes, but go drive it, and it should reset itself if it doesn't idle properly right away. So first, let's go ahead and install this. Let's start the car up and see if it idles properly or if it does need to actually be reset. And if it does, I'm curious to see if the idle actually drops after that, because like I said, this thing's pretty much been idling at about 1,000 to 1,100 pretty permanently for the last year and a half, and I've known that and just haven't done anything about it till now, because finally the code came and gave me something to whine about. So let's do it. Now, because I know that the bottom one's harder to reach, I'm going to start out by just leaving the bottom one in here, put the tool on it, and then bring it down and plug it in. Let's get it straight first, and then hopefully that way it'll be easier for me. Oh, it's not being easier. Easier for me to reach though and get it started. You know, if I reach my fingers down underneath the fuel rail actually, then I can kind of reach it. Oh, look at the top of the stars. Now these are really tiny bolts, so if you do have it on a socket like this, be very careful not to over tighten and snap them. You do not need to turn hard at all. Like, I'm not even pulling on this thing hardly at all. Just enough to where it's a little past finger tight. When I put it in with my fingers, it should be enough. There we go. Cool, well, plug it in. Awesome, there's a new one. Let's go ahead and clear the codes and start this thing up and see what happens. If you've never cleared your codes before, you're gonna wanna go ahead and turn the key back on. I left this plugged in the whole time. Either way though, when I had the key on and off, and it stayed on that screen, but it won't operate or actually do anything if the key's not on, so it wants to read them again because I hit the button. Way to go me. Okay, so with the key on, you should be able to just go down to erase codes. DTCs and freeze data will be lost. Yes, I wish to continue. Erasing codes. Erase done. Any key to continue. Cool. Now, I'm going to go ahead and turn the key off and back on and try and start it, and let's see how she idles. So I don't even know if I have to drive this thing. It's actually idling right now at about 900 RPM, and it's not even fully warmed up yet. So it hasn't been idling that low for, like I said, over a year. It's been idling much higher than that all the time. But yeah, when I first started it there, it ran up to about 22 or 2300 RPM, and then it just slowly stepped down again, and then, like I said, now it's at about 900. So I would say, based on that, I think that fixed it. But I will have to go drive it and stuff to confirm, but I'm happy to know hopefully that took care of the issue, and hopefully my check engine light stays off, because I gotta go smog this thing soon. Alright guys, that's it. Thank you for watching. Now, just before I went and shut the Jeep off, after I turned the camera off, it actually ended up dropping all the way down to about 700 RPM. So I know that has got to be what it was that was the issue, because it hasn't idled that low, and like I said, I don't even remember how long. So I'm glad that that was what it ended up being. Obviously it wasn't as straightforward as I was hoping for it to be. All the circuitry and stuff was still in place. That old valve was just had mechanically failed from years of use and abuse. So either way, I'm glad it got figured out. Also glad it was something cheap. Hopefully the check engine light stays off now and I can get this thing to pass monitors and go past smog so I can keep it registered and keep driving it. And yeah, anyways, if you guys enjoyed the video, please leave a comment down below if you have any comments. If you have any questions or anything else you'd like to learn, or any videos you guys would like to see us do, leave a comment for that as well. And then don't forget to check down the description. I'm going to go ahead and leave a few links down there. We used the scanner in this video. I'll leave a couple links down there for different options for that. We also used a multimeter and some wiring stuff for that. So go check those things out. They are really handy tools to have, and if you want to start learning how to work on your own car and how to diagnose and fix things, you're definitely going to want to have those tools, because otherwise you're just going to be guessing and throwing parts at a problem, not knowing if that's going to fix it, and that gets expensive real quick and a big waste of time, when sometimes it's something simple that you could have easily replaced if you'd done the diagnosis work first. Anyways, I'm done lecturing. Thank you again for watching, guys. I hope you have a good evening. And as always, keep wrenching.